Okay, it's 2 o'clock. It looks like just about everyone is back. We'll wait another 30 seconds. Okay, we'll get underway. We're going to begin our period of public comment. Members of the public who have dialed in, you can indicate your interest in giving comment by raising your hand. Katie Syme from our team at ASF is going to call on people in the order in which they raise their hand. She will then promote you to a panelist. It may look like you're being disconnected, but you're not. It may also take a couple of seconds until you're changed from an attendee to a panelist, so please be patient. Katie will let you know when we can see you and we can hear you. We ask that if you're giving public comment that you please try to turn your camera on. So Katie?
Okay, Lori McGowan, I will be promoting you to panelist now. Okay. Hello, Lori, we can see you now. Please take yourself off mute.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear
Hello.
me?
Yeah, we
Yes.
can see you, Lori.
Okay. Thanks so much, everyone. My name is Lori McElwain. I'm the parent of a 26-year-old son with a long history of elopement and founder and president of the National Autism Safety Council, or NASC. For the past 20 years, I've worked as an independent researcher and advocate on autism elopement, have studied thousands of cases spanning 5 decades, published multiple studies, consulted on state and federal policy, and developed national programs. I also brought this issue to the I-ACC in early 2010. I want to thank current and past I-ACC members for helping move this issue forward. Together, this committee has contributed to meaningful progress in research, training, resources, tools, and federal policy. And without those efforts, I believe the numbers I share with you today would be much higher. According to NASC, since June 1st alone, at least 24 autistic individuals have died following elopement, 21 of those by drowning. We're currently seeing an average of 8 elopement fatalities per month in the US. Among cases in 2026, where race is known, nearly 4 out of 5 involve a child or adult of color. You can also view our 2026 elopement fatality data dashboard at searchwaterfirst.org. In April, our federal I-ACC delivered a presentation on the topic of autism elopement, and from that submitted a federal document referred to as Attachment D, which proposes safety measures and policy objectives. However, it does not acknowledge this racial disparity or recommend targeted prevention strategies. Because Attachment D relied extensively on my surveillance research, which is now maintained through NASC, and referenced both NASC and me multiple times, I was surprised that we were at least not asked to review it before publication. As a result, Attachment D and some of HHS's recent messaging contains factual errors, mischaracterizations, omits critical gaps, overlooks existing work on WIA alerts, and recommends certain approaches not supported by the evidence. NASC has provided a full written statement that includes corrections, clarifications, and specific recommendations to strengthen the federal I-ACC's Attachment D. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. I'm going to put you back down to an attendee now. If anyone else would like to make public comment, please raise your hand. Okay, Jalen Prince, I will be promoting you to panelist. Okay, yes, we see you now. Hello.
Thank you. I was unable to be to the first portion of this because we were dealing with a board member who had just passed away, and we needed to turn some new documents over to a new attorney. But I wanted to make certain, I don't know if you've already talked about some of the issues of looking at adults with autism. That is our prime interest, although we need to look at things with younger individuals too, say, like with the Department of Education and the things that are happening there, they could have great impact on adulthood. We're very interested in lived experience, and that's the thing that we are working on in many, many ways. Although we are very supportive of good science, my husband is a scientist. He came up with a treatment for RSV a number of years ago, and we know a lot of researchers, and we do highly endorse good research. And Allison, I want to thank you for bringing things forward in some of your comments and things that I see on a regular basis. It's very important to have those things. But I want to emphasize the lived experience with adults and how important that's going to be to track things. Because we can have research, but if we aren't understanding how it is that those components may be lived out and what the reality is for adults. And we're working on a number of those things across the country and trying to bring intergenerational individuals together on the autism spectrum to formulate communities so they can be of support to one another through life's journey. And we will be tracking a number of these things. I think it's going to be very important, especially when it comes to loneliness, mental health, and other types of things, because people will know one another in their community, even though they maybe were not in the same school class or in the same general neighborhood at any particular point. But I do want to encourage things and looking forward to um, doing more search and research about adults with autism. I think it could also have a lot of impact on geriatrics and the general population as a whole. So I think as we put these things forward, we can encourage people with our research because it may benefit many others, because our greater understanding uh, could possibly transcend into many other arenas. But I thank you all for the work that you're doing and encourage staying in touch with people with lived experience in adulthood and the things that are happening there, and continue with the fine things that you are doing. And I know you've got some very wonderful people on your panel. Thank you.
Jalen, before you go, could you just share the name of the organization that you're speaking on behalf of for people who might not know?
Yes, it's Madison House Autism Foundation. And one of the things that we have happens to be a 275-acre farm. And we have a lot of experiential types of things and employment things going on there. So we can see different aspects of people's lives, as well as a major project throughout one entire state, trying to do community building within our population. Thank you.
Thank you. I will be moving you back to an attendee now. If anyone else would like to comment, please raise your hand. Okay. Stephen Knapp, I will be promoting you to panelist. Hello, Stephen.
So I did write some comments, and I and those were regarding, for one issue, the I-ACC had 7 priority areas in prior versions. As many of you are familiar with, screening and diagnosis, biology, genetics and environmental factors, intervention services and supports, lifespan issues, infrastructure, and prevalence. And whereas the strategic plan draft only covered biological, environmental um, matters, potential causation, co-occurring issue, and some of these, and it is important to research co-occurring issues, and biology is important, but also these various other areas, including which the independent autism coordinating committee today have talked about some of these areas of transition to adulthood, and um, in some of the research being funded in various areas. So it's important that I think, well, the I-ACC continue to prioritize it to cover and fund different areas of autism research, and it's of course a public-facing body. And I think for the independent group to advocate for it to do its public duty, because even whatever one may wish for from biological research, there's also various matters more immediately with communication and mental health and education, employment. And any of these services obviously can be research, and housing matters, um, and so I encourage for the strategic plan of the independent group to have a broader practical focus in addition to in terms of research for adults, et cetera, and transition services beyond um, causation, et cetera. And I think there already is some, obviously, it's not necessarily doing the research, but in the organizations that are in the independent group to continue to, and maybe branch into, in some cases, some of these I mean, areas, obviously, people who have higher and complex support needs um, do need to be prioritized in services and research, um, and I mean, I would say that there are so many difficulties all of us who research love people encounter with measurement, and one of them is that um, that language and intellectual ability or disability, as for all, language disability, intellectual disability, and impairments in basic self-care and adaptive functioning are all dissociable. That research on and trying to investigate profound autism has found that as well. And of course, they may not have language, but still have strong intellectual ability. And Jason Arday was someone who didn't speak until he was 11. He didn't read and write until he was 18. He became the youngest Black professor in the history of the University of Cambridge. But not everyone is of high or average intellectual ability at all. And people with profound intellectual disability, well, also for that matter, can participate in research, and there's phenomenological research, there's ethnographic research, there are various kinds of research and various people doing it. Ned Redmore, Holly Sutherland, Joanna Grace, they're, they're probably proportionally higher in the UK than the US, to be honest. But I think, but who are really committed to actively including people regardless of intellectual ability, and that people are often misunderstood and underestimated. And Helen is also, you were a senior author of a study where out of 1,579 minimally people with minimal language, the youth, only about a quarter could understand more language than they could express, and only one person was measured to be the opposite. Um, so of expressing more than they understand, which is a stereotype and not necessarily the reality about autistic people, especially autistic people with minimal speech or language. And so all these areas are separate there, and people can be non-speaking and some may have support for typing, what have you, and other people who also have various language abilities who do have 24/7 care needs. And so they're not the same. And so all three of them, again,
Steve, I'm going to ask you to try to bring this to a close in the next 30 seconds, please.
and there are difficulties with trying to implement them too. We saw that with the DSM-4, with trying to have subdiagnoses, and we see it now with the DSM-5 that which label you have has more to do with which clinic you go to, like whether a level of support needs than the individual person. And so there are many complexities, and of course, many people are very concerned about people who do have intense support needs, about whether their needs and rights and any forms of expression that they have that are trying to express any agency and autonomy are respected in segregated settings that are in quote intentional communities unquote really the community. And these changes to Olmsted, many people have many concerns about, including people who no one would ever question would meet criteria for profound autism, regardless of their views about the category.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Okay. If anyone else would like to comment, please raise your hand now. Okay, Jennifer Phillips, I am promoting you. Hello, Jennifer.
Everyone. Thank you for taking my question. At the beginning of the meeting, Helen Taylor Flusberg mentioned 3 efforts defined by the federal strategic plan. She expanded on 2 of them, mentioned regression as a primary cross-cutting theme in the plan, but then stopped short of going into any detail regarding the 3rd effort, a national neurodevelopmental regression initiative. Roughly 30 to 40% of those with autism experience a neurodevelopmental regression, and that specific cohort is shown to have significantly worse outcomes. So clearly, this is an important topic to highlight. Can Helen or anyone else on the committee please explain for viewers what efforts the independent I-ACC intends to take regarding neurodevelopmental regression and where they believe researchers should be focused, specifically regarding the balance of genetics and environmental factors?
I think that's something that as we work to develop the strategic plan will be part of the discussion, what to include and how it should be included. So I don't know that any one person could answer that right now. But thank you, Jennifer.
Sure. Then I guess I just want to highlight the gap in that research and ask for increased focus from this committee on that important topic.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Would anyone else like to make a public comment? Please raise your hand.
Okay, I think we can take the time back. Let me share. All right, so I want to thank everyone who took the time to give public comment. I know there are some people who don't like to give public comment or be on camera and or just speak on webinars. You are very welcome to submit your comments in writing, and they are distributed to all of the members of the committee, and they are also posted and shared on the website. So just like with oral public comment, they are available to all of the members of the committee and the public. So we're going to turn our attention now to discussing developing a process for building out the strategic plan. All of the committee members have now had the opportunity to share their ideas for content to include in the plan, and we've also heard ideas from oral public comment and written public comment. And I think all of the committee members did a great job sharing their content, but everyone's presentation was organized a little bit differently. So what I like to propose by way of starting this discussion is that we look towards developing a shared template today that each member of the committee might use to reformat their content so that there's some uniformity, and that then those templates could be used to develop the draft of the plan. So let's step back and talk about the strategic plan. The current I-ACC strategic plan is the one that was published back in 2023. In September, it was developed under the requirements of the Autism Cares Act of 2019. And as Steve reminded us in public comment, it's based on a 7-chapter structure. Question 1, improving identification of autism. Question 2, what is the biology underlying autism? Question 3, what are the genetic and environmental factors that contribute to autism and its co-occurring conditions? Question 4 is around interventions that will improve health and well-being. Question 5, which services and supports will maximize well-being and health? Question 6, how can we address the needs of people across their lifespan? And question 7, how do we expand and enhance the infrastructure systems so that they are better able to meet the needs of the community? Each of those 7 chapters used the same framework, started with an aspirational goal, described the current state of the science, described the needs and the opportunities within that question, gave 3 recommendations, talked about the potential impact of those recommendations and directions for future study, and then had some specific studies listed and budget recommendations. Beyond the chapters, there were also, every version of the plan has had cross-cutting themes. And the committee has, when I was on the committee, we talked for quite a while about what those cross-cutting themes should be. In the last iteration of the plan, they were sex and gender differences, as well as equity, diversity, inclusion, accessibility, and reducing disparities. I put together a proposed template for the new plan just to start the discussion. I know that when I'm working, I don't like to start from a blank piece of paper. So I wanted to put on the table, based on our past discussion, at our last meeting, we did talk about wanting to retain the 7-question structure as a way to continue to organize the plan so that it was a family-facing document. It's organized based around the seven questions that a stakeholder might ask. So we thought we might, for each person of the committee, to take their material that they presented to the committee and organize it into what is the name of the topic area, which question number does it fit into? describing the progress to date and the vision for the future, describing the research gaps in that area, describing the research opportunities. And this is something I thought the new I-ACC plan does nicely, which is it does look at the short term, the medium term, and the long term. I think that's important, and that's something that the past I-ACC plan didn't always do. But I think it's important to think, what can we do right out of the gate? What takes a little more time, and what are long-term goals? Then I think we have to really think about, what is the role of the government in accomplishing this work, and what is the role of private funders? And this again is a differentiation from the federal plan, which really only focuses on the government's role and less on private funders, and then get into specific recommendations. But I'm going to propose, based on our last meeting, based on what Tom said today and talked about the changing percentage of autism research funding coming from the government, and based on a comment Kelsey made in our first meeting, which was how important it is for us to work to coordinate the work of the private funders. And by private funders, I mean everyone except the government. So I was going to propose that our cross-cutting themes be the growing role of the private versus the public sector, building out private-public partnerships, thinking about how can this plan intersect with the federal I-ACC plan, and then also talking about private-private partnerships. I think we heard a lot today about how the work of Safari informed the work of ARIA. And I think that, to Kelsey's point from our previous meeting, it's very important now that there are so many more large private funders of autism research, it's going to be important that they have an opportunity to communicate with each other, learn what each other is doing, work together, not duplicate effort. We don't want to be wasting any of our very precious resources. So this slide is intended to start discussion. So I will stop talking now and encourage discussion. Kelsey.
Yeah, so I have a question, and I think I've been thinking about it ever since Tom's comments this morning about how the private sector has overtaken the federal funding sources. And I really want to see the data for it. I think it's important, and I do think it's worth having a discussion about, what is the federal responsibility in terms of our national priorities for improving health. I personally worry a lot about expecting that it's going to be the private sector that's going to address issues. And I think that, at least for Safari, one of the benefits has been being able to fund higher risk areas, that really complement what federal funders have done. Anyway,
I wanted to
yeah.
take notes on this, but I can't seem to do that if I'm sharing my screen. Is that right, Katie? Can I not change the slides when they're being shared?
I'm not 100% sure, but if it's not letting you, then probably.
Anyway,
All right,
for me, it's a bigger sort of philosophical question that I do think is important to have a discussion about.
Can I just weigh in quickly on this?
Yeah, of course.
Kelsey raises a good point. We talk about this in terms of who's putting in what kinds of money, but it's not just the amount of money that matters. It's the kind of science that matters, and a different kind of science is often supported, public versus private funding. And I think in the plan, we need both. And we need to sort of clarify who can do each one of those best. And then I would love to see the development of more public-private partnerships that make that happen. The FNIH has been just incredibly successful in a few areas. They haven't done anything that I can think of in autism, but by bringing the private sector and the public sector together, they've created these massively effective programs for biomarkers, for diagnostics of Alzheimer's disease, through ADNI, through the whole series of things they've done in infectious diseases and kidney disease and many other areas. We don't have a lot of structures like that for public-private efforts, and I can't think of one that's really been effective in the autism space, but it would be great to think about what that might look like.
Actually, it'd be great to have somebody from FNIH, even Julie Geberding, come and talk here because they were several years ago exploring doing something in autism. But I think it's a great suggestion.
Other thoughts? I mean, do members of the committee think that they can express their research goals that they shared with the committee in a template like this? Or what changes would you suggest to better reflect your priorities? John?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, I think um, uh, just touching on kind of the discussion on the federal versus industry and kind of private research, I think, we also want to be mindful during this discussion of also some of the potential negative impacts there might be in terms of clarity on research information going on and things being in the private sector and that research maybe not being as accessible or at least known. I think so far we have a lot of philanthropic and industry funding that people are doing things in a nice, helpful way for supporting the science in a lot of areas, but just the for that to be a significant concern if we see increasing movement of this research being primarily supported from non-federal funds.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's while we recognize that the percentage of private funding is growing, the federal spending is all of our money. I mean, we're all citizens, we all pay taxes. We have the right and the responsibility to share our views about how we think that our tax money can be best spent. So we don't want to not I mean, of course, we want to focus some on the federal government as well. Amy.
Amy, you're on mute.
I'm so sorry. I know, Allison, you said this is just like the first draft, but I'm wondering there's obviously, given that we all presented on our kind of most important work that we're doing, there's a lot of gaps in things that are important in the autism community that were not represented just because of who the people on this committee are. And there are also some duplication. So there were, as far as I'm remembering, between last time and today, is several presentations about genetic medicine, which is obviously a really important thing. But then all of those presenters are going to be spending their time completing this template, and there's going to be a lot of duplication of effort as far as the research gaps and the kind of the state of the science and so forth. So I'm wondering if there might be a better way to organize, getting kind of some subcommittees about, on interventions or services or science or something, and then kind of having each committee come up with their templates for the things that they think need to be included. I mean, just a thought to make sure that might be the next step after everybody does this for their own thing to say, well, what's left out? But anyway, just to kind of throw that out there.
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, this will be a start, but it will not be sufficient to cover all of the topics, but it's a starting place. And I also think that when each person utilizes this template or version of this template, all of the committee members will need to read through it and make sure that we move towards having a final product that reflects the collective wisdom of the full committee. You're right. We have had the most number of presentations on genetic medicine, which is why when I sort of pressure tested this template, I used genetic medicine as an example because there was the most content from the last meeting on genetic medicine. So I was able to, I think, reflect the content presented both today and at our last meeting around genetic medicine with capturing the progress made to date, reflecting that we have discovered 250 genes and now are moving from discovery into recovery with genetic medicines that include ASOs, gene replacement, RNA, gene editing, small molecule therapies, that we're moving towards clinical trials. I mean, you can read this, and that the vision for the future is that individuals with genetically defined forms of autism and idiopathic autism have access to safe, effective, evidence-based genetic medicines. I think that's really critical, and I think that's what Dan's slides were trying to get at, that this is not just about the monogenic forms, it's about understanding the biological pathways and then applying them to others who may not have an identified gene yet. Then the research gaps, the research opportunities, looking at the short term, the medium term, and here, Tom, I put in your comment about it's critical to actually, what is the dose, right? And why right now we're only looking at these in isolation. We do ASO trials and we do CRISPR trials. Well, we don't really do ASO and CRISPR together. So that's something that we need to think about. The timing. The new research is showing that our original thoughts around genetic medicine only being useful for very young children may be wrong. The clinical trial data is showing that it can be effective there was a 50-year-old man in one of the trials who spoke his first words. It brought me to tears. And then the long term is, how are we translating these therapies into routine clinical practice and actually getting them to people who need them across our very broad population. I looked a little bit at the role of the government and the role of the private partners here. There are things that the government is able to do around creating public good that the private partners are not able to do. There are things that industry is able to do that the government is not able to do. But industry, they're not going to develop, for example, endpoints that can be used by their competitors. Right? They're going to look at their own endpoints. So one thing that I think the government might be able to do would be to begin to, maybe we can have the FDA start to pre-identify some agreed upon endpoints that all of the trials could work towards, so that we have, again, moving towards a system where we have more replicability. And then the specific recommendations. Ironically, the recommendation that we had around this is similar to what appears in the new federal plan, which is to build out something similar to the Precision Therapeutics Initiative that's described in the federal strategic plan. Although in that plan, it doesn't really include genetic medicines as one of its goal areas, but it's similar in idea that we want to bring together we want to coordinate the functions and bring federal partners together to build out infrastructure and create the infrastructure that will accelerate development and focus on, again, what the government is able to do that industry needs, but industry is not able to do.
I like that, Allison. The question I have, I have not read the I-ACC draft plan that's out for public comment, but I wonder how much of that actually is worth borrowing. If there's something there, like you mentioned, the timeframes being a good way to present this. I don't feel like we have to essentially react to what they put out, but if there are good ideas there, for instance, repurposing as one of the ways to get to new therapeutics, I'd hope that we wouldn't ignore them. I think we should leverage them.
I have not read all 346 pages. We skimmed it. There are some things in there that are very interesting ideas. There are some things in there that I think have not been considered, that we would consider. There's not a lot of talk in the plan that I saw yet about genetic medicines. But there are certainly things I think we want to think about in our plan. What are the ways that this plan can interact with the federal plan? Joe?
Yes, thank you. Allison, I believe this template idea is a great process, a great way to streamline all of the different perspectives together into a consistent format. I would just like to suggest that we, in addition to the parameters that you identified here, that we also try to be sure to include gaps and opportunities across the entire range of the autism spectrum, and then across the entire full lifespan. And I think that we also should include what Jennifer Phillips mentioned about aging and regression analysis and dementia and Alzheimer's. And uh, I know that is those are big issues in the Down syndrome community, for example. And but I think that's in addition to the full lifespan and the spectrum, we have to look at those later years and how regression and those other factors play into the lifespan.
Well, the new CARES Act requires that by law, but we now have to include the full spectrum.
Okay.
Eric?
Yeah, I appreciate those comments Joe just made. Yeah, I think I just want to make a few comments. I mean, so the first thing, Allison, is you asked about this template. I like this template, and I think I could work with that as a member of the committee. I would just like a few follow-up comments. So I too found Tom Insel's comments today compelling and really thought-provoking in terms of what the inputs are, where they're coming from in funding autism research. And it made me think, so I'm still puzzling over, in particular, the balance of basic research versus applied research and how, with that shifting landscape, basic research may be less protected. That might be a concern, and I'd like to look into the data on that because my sense is, and my intuition is that the NIH and public sources of funding have protected basic research, and that's so critical. Another aspect on that discussion of where the funding's coming from to support the data is what is the access to the data based on those different funding sources. And one of my concerns is if there's increasingly more industry support, whether the access to the data will be, and the presentations of the data may be biased in one way or another. Um, so so that's one comment. Another comment I wonder about is, just harking on my theme of interdisciplinarity. I'm a proponent of thinking about how to accelerate autism research by working with people from adjacent fields who may actually not know that they're working on something that is relevant to autism. And the Simons Foundation for decades really has really done exceptionally well bringing new people into the field. And I almost think you can have an addendum to this plan thinking about which fields we should be talking to, like, linguistics or, in fields that are on the edge of two different fields, neuroinflammation, neurometabolism. Um, and then my final comment is, and I'm new today, so I'm just wondering what the committee thinks about how to address the opportunities and perhaps some of the sensitivities around AI as AI is taking off. Like, where does AI fit into this proposed plan? And admittedly, I'll say I'm new, so I may be missing a very large discussion around AI, but I think probably this committee might certainly want to get ahead of it in thinking about the position and opportunities and also sensitivities for the broader autism community.
Tom? You're mute.
Yeah, Eric, thanks for bringing that up. I've been thinking about the kind of conspicuous absence of that topic in the conversation both today and in the previous meeting. And it does feel, I'm not sure if it's a cross-cutting theme, but it's an opportunity that probably will be leveraged more in the private sector than in academia, where there's a greater focus on product, on robotics, on actually creating solutions rather than on the basic science piece. But I do think that AI is a game changer for the way we're thinking about what can be done here. And so not sure how to work it into this except in terms of research gaps. But absolutely, especially in the short term, not so much around therapeutics, but maybe more on the diagnostic end. So what AI allows us to do is to move away from biomarkers defined by imaging and genetics and biology and to actually get much more precision around cognition, uh, behavior, emotion, things that we have been very imprecise about in the past. And those may become actually the key diagnostic features for all brain disorders going forward. So I think there's a massive opportunity here on even the most basic things that we talk about in terms of diagnosis, assessment, creating endpoints, all of that. It's clearly changing the landscape for mental health, but also I think within neurodevelopmental disorders, a massive opportunity that hasn't yet been realized.
If I could work on these slides in real time, I would put under the cross-cutting themes AI. So note to self. John W.
Hi. This has been a great conversation, and I am appreciative following up Eric's comments and Tom's comments about how important innovation is going forward and really thinking in terms of kind of not traditional iterative approaches to innovation, but quite dramatic, ground shaking, groundbreaking kind of innovation. I do worry, and I don't know if it's really appropriate for a strategic plan, but as Tom noted earlier, the money is flat or even increased at the NIH, and yet 4,400 people are no longer working there to implement and distribute those dollars. And so what we're seeing is maybe an idealistic idea about future innovation, but it's not really being matched by the kind of infrastructure that's required to distribute those dollars and to get those dollars in play. So again, just thinking on a very pragmatic level about what we can do in terms of, yes, we want to support innovation in the future, but we also really have to have the infrastructure available to kind of distribute those dollars and make those things happen.
Kelsey.
I wanted underscore Eric's comments about data and data access. I think it's going to be very important, data privacy. And just make one comment about AI because I see it as really sort of integral to all of the science that we're doing. If I think in genetics, AI is enabling enormous insights in terms of behavioral analyses. And so I just think it's another tool that's going to advance the work that's being done at all levels in kind of unbelievably impactful way.
Other comments? John H.
Yes, yeah, I was just commenting to kind of go back to the template a little bit. It might be good to add a potential prompt to include any information about how we see this type of information we're getting together, how it might interact with what is in the federal plan, at least to provide kind of some guidance on where we're seeing overlap or what ideas from there might be helping to support some of what the committee is bringing up.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Again, if I could change this in real time, I would be typing on the page right now. Okay, so is there a general consensus around moving forward with this plan with the revisions and additions that have been discussed?
Yeah, we might
Okay.
want to determine, and this can be kind of asynchronous as well, but we might want to determine kind of what the plan will be for how we're kind of divvying things up to also make sure we're not end up with the redundancy that was brought up earlier.
Yeah, I think if you feel like you might be each committee member, if you feel like you might your area might be redundant with another's. You may want to just work together to do the template together. But I think it would be good for us to set a date by which the committee members would submit this in. And then I'm also going to suggest, again, based on Kelsey's idea, that each member who leads an organization maybe submit a couple of paragraphs about their progress to date, their vision for the future, what they see as the research gaps and the opportunities, and where they think that they can best interact with other private funders as well as with the government. So I'll ask for all of that. I know we had already said we want to work on developing response to the federal I-ACC strategic plan. That will be due on August 20th. So maybe we could set a deadline for this content to be after that. Maybe right after, maybe August 31st.
Yeah.
Helen, did you want to?
Yeah, I think these are such exciting ideas, and I'm particularly I love the idea of working on this public-private and the division between the different sectors, as well as the role of AI. I'm hoping, though, we could see this as a little bit of an iterative process. So while I'm happy to move ahead, perhaps in collaboration with one or two other people on the committee to focus on communication and language, and I have some ideas on the role of AI and so forth, but that's not, I've dropped out of the field before this all had to come to a head. So if iteratively, if other people on the committee, I'm thinking Tom and some of the others, would see a way of fleshing out each of these topics, so that we could sort of cut across in that way. These cross-cutting themes may involve cross-cutting individuals on the committee.
Tom and Sal as cross-cutting theme. Okay, so yeah, I mean this is the beginning. We'll then have to take what each committee member puts together and we'll all have to look at it.
Yeah.
And all have to think about it. And as Amy said earlier, there will absolutely be gaps that we will then have to discuss and fill those gaps.
Just to clarify, Allison, this is all based on the 7 original questions, right? So this maps on
Yeah.
the original
Well,
structure.
we talked at the last meeting about whether we wanted to use that format. We decided we did. We can change our minds. I think it's a nice way of organizing it. I particularly always liked that the federal plan was stakeholder focused. I thought that was just a nice framework. So we can see how when we do these templates, if it fits, it may not. I mean, we may find that if we're going to focus on public-private partnership and private-private partnership, that the usefulness of the 7-question framework is not as great. But I think it's a place to start, and I think it would be interesting as committee members are filling out this template to see which question numbers we have content for and which ones we need to think more about. But again, this is the beginning.
Yeah, I wasn't questioning the judgment about that. I think it's a great idea actually to provide continuity for what has been done in the past rather than coming up with an entirely new structure.
Manny?
So I guess I just want to agree with that different organizations and individuals here are going to have a very potentially very different perspective or capabilities or resources. I certainly as private equity and intellectual property in pharma, they have, I don't work in this domain, but I presume they have major considerations about product and IP, and goals that they're driving. And I don't think necessarily, well, some of the members on the committee here don't operate in that space. So I certainly can be a wish list of what we might imagine. We've seen what private equity has been doing to nationalizing ABA networks, and significant concerns about Medicaid payments and everything. And yet that is one of the private sources of funding. I don't know how to think about communicating or establishing common goals. Again, it's not an area of work, and I'm sure there are others on the committee who have something to say about that.
Yeah, I can respond to that a little bit. I think, Manny, it's a great example of where the lack of science and the lack of clear endpoints has led to sort of a set of perverse incentives. And that now is going to lead to painful regulation with perverse consequences. So the beauty of what we're talking about here is to provide the kind of evidence that can be used across the board, whether that's for regulation, it's for policy, it's for payers to figure out, okay, what is it that actually should be in scope and not in scope for Medicaid, all of those issues. And I think what I like about what we're doing here is we're defining the questions that need to be answered. We're getting at the problems that actually have, in some cases, like with ABA, a really urgent need, because there's $11 billion hanging on this question today, and four states that are going to be probably sued because they're not going to go along with Medicaid medical necessity regulations. So this is a really important area at scale. And we ought to be able to weigh in on what is the science that we need to be able to serve the public for this.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, so let's talk about our action items. There they are. We agreed we would write and submit feedback regarding the federal I-ACC plan. The individuals who wanted to take a first crack at that. Again, the content will go before the whole committee. Helen, David, Kelsey, Amy, John H., John W., Eric, and Zach. Did I miss anyone there? Okay.
Yes,
I missed
think
you. I'm sorry.
Joe.
That's the second time I did that today. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Allison.
Okay. I will add you.
Allison,
Apparently, though,
are
I
you
cannot do it. Very
I
frustrating.
don't see your name listed there.
Well, I'll supervise. Yeah, we agreed that we would get our templates to me, our completed templates by August 31st, and that committee members who were also leaders of organizations would use, in addition to using the template for their research agenda, would use their templates to describe the research agenda and needs and opportunities for collaboration for their organizations. We need to set a date for our next meeting. Maybe we'll do that by sending out a doodle poll. I think that's the best way than to try to find a time while we're all on this call. Does anyone have any new business that they want to bring before the committee as a whole? I mean, one thing we could, John H.
Sorry, yeah, I was just going to add that it might be good if maybe Allison, if you could start a email thread with those of us that'll be responding here so that we can kind of divvy stuff up a bit. And I think that'll give us a better end product.
Yep, I'll even make you a Google Doc. I can do that. Okay. I'm just writing that down. One thing that the federal IAC used to do is Susan Daniels, as the head of ORAC, used to present the work of the IAC at INSAR each year. Believe it or not, the submission window for INSAR is about to open. Is that something we want to do? Do we want to submit an abstract and share with the global community the work that we are taking on here and look for opportunities for global collaboration? Who might like to take that on? John is our informal representative from INSAR. You are the chair of the INSAR Autistic Researchers Committee. Is that something you might want to take on?
Sure.
You have a good shot of the abstract being accepted. We can all work on it with you. But someone's name has to go on it for submission.
Yeah, that's good.
I think that would be a nice opportunity. I know Susan used to do that every year and people looked forward to it.
Yeah, I think, John, you'd be a great choice for this.
Yeah, happy to help.
Any other ideas or new business or concerns you want to bring up before we adjourn? Okay. I want to thank everyone again for your participation today. I also want to let everyone who is watching, I want to let everyone know that we will be posting the video from this meeting on the I-ACC website, probably by the end of next week. I want to thank everyone who dialed in and watched. I want to thank everyone who participated by giving public comment and everyone who submitted written comment. We read those, we take them seriously, we incorporate that comment. So thank you again and have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, Allison, Helen, everybody.